If I asked you to summarize the plot of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, you'd probably say it's about a girl magically carried away from Earth by a tornado to some unearthly realm with talking animals, sorceresses, and animated scarecrows. But that is a misinterpretation of L. Frank Baum's original intention for his Land of Oz.
Explain yourself, Geller.
Okay. Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, influences on or contemporaries of L. Frank Baum's Oz Oeuvre, I'd say are the origin of portal fantasy, where someone, usually from our world, travels to another, more interesting world. If we expand the definition to say these stories don't have to include an actual portal, you might say Harry Potter or Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom books or even Doctor Who can be considered portal fantasy. While I don't think these pioneers sat down and thought about why they were inventing a new subgenre, I can hazard a guess. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was published in 1865, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900, Barrie's Peter Pan play first performed in 1904. This was a time when the world felt larger than it does today. To someone living in Syracuse, something happening in the Alaskan Territory might as well have been on another world. You could go there. The Transcontinental Railroad was completed in the 1860s, but it would be extremely inconvenient. And that was an east to west thing. That still left a whole lot of room for stuff to be happening out there that the air quotes civilized world wouldn't have had any way of knowing about. Oz, Wonderland, and Neverland aren't meant to be weird multiversal jaunts. They're the last of the breed of stories pioneered by Homer with Odysseus visiting islands with witches or cyclopses, or Sinbad of 1001 Nights fighting giant birds. The conceit is that these stories are happening on our world. Sinbad isn't traveling through a portal to a completely different world. Same for Alice, Wendy, and Dorothy. The 1939 movie, not that far removed from when the book came out, was still far enough into the 20th century that the idea that Oz is on our world was probably seen as ridiculous. The automobile was just getting started when the book came out. 2 years later, the Wright brothers made their first flight at Kitty Hawk, and by the time the movie came out, we'd been through a world war. We're about to get into another one, where airplanes were used to shape the outcome of the war. Some remote location separated by miles of desert wasteland, while unlikely, may have seemed a little bit plausible to audiences, especially children audiences, at the turn of the century. But 40 years later, not so much. And so, the film uses visual language to tell us this is not the same terrestrial plane that Dorothy hails from.
But you don't have to take my word for it.
That's right, Mr. Burton. They can hop on over to Baum's fifth book in the Oz series, The Road to Oz, and see for themselves. That book begins with Dorothy stepping into the road to give directions to a Shaggy Man, only to find the 5 roads she is familiar with replaced by at least 17 roads. They're able to walk to the Land of Oz, so Dorothy can be transferred back home. Even here, Baum intended for Oz to be a place, yes, very strange and unusual, but one that can be accessed reasonably easily from our own planet Earth.
I traveled through the 7 levels of the candy cane forest, past the sea of swirly, twirly gumdrops, and then I walked through the Lincoln Tunnel.
Maybe it's because I'm a misanthropic homebody, but I miss when stories didn't need a secret entrance to have adventures, when the adventures could, theoretically, be had by anyone on this blue marble. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I'm thankful for technological achievements that allow me to survive where I couldn't have just over a century ago. But these leaps in technology sounded the death knell for that sense of wonder in these stories that you don't see anymore, at least not in the way that you did once upon a time. You can still have a sense of scope and mystery in stories. Looking at the fantasy genre, though, it generally has to be a completely made-up place that isn't part of our world we live on. And while I wouldn't say it's a crucial ingredient for the survival of the genre, if anything, fantasy adventure stories thrive more now than they did 100 years ago. But I still miss it. Am I overthinking this? Let me know, and I'll be back next week to overcomplicate something else. Until then, have a good one.